Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. From the right, I'm Gary Polland.
And from the left, I'm David Jones.
Tonight we are going to discuss the City of Houston issues and the candidates running for Houston City Council District B. And joining us are two distinguished guests, Texas State Representative Garnet Coleman, who represents the 147th District of Texas. That's in Harris County, David. And Houston Weekly's African-American newspaper, The Defender, owner and publisher, Sonny Messiah-Jiles. That's short for Sonceria. Sonceria. I like Sonny better. Okay. So welcome to both of you.
Great to be here.
You tongue-tied Gary Polland.
Yes, it's a first.
It's a first. Go with Sonny. It's okay.
So we're going to have, Ernie Manoose is going to be hosting this debate soon with District B, and then succeeding weeks are going to be other council races. So let's kind of see what you guys can help us with as far as the city issues go. You know, you, for instance, Mr. Coleman, you actually represent Houstonians. Just not these Houstonians that are going to be voting in B, right?
That's right. But this says a lot when you have 9 candidates.
It does.
That says a lot, because that means there are people who are interested in being on city council. After term limits, we didn't have that many people actually running for district seats like District B. So I think we have a good crop of people for people to choose from, as opposed to just 1 or 2.
Where's District B?
District B actually borders between 5th Ward, Cashmere Gardens, Acres Home, North Forest, Settergas. Help me out. Am I missing anybody?
And then up Pinemont and northwest, up northwest, up towards, going up towards the airport.
Right. And we should say that District B was represented by Jarvis Johnson, who's no longer running.
Right, termed out.
His constituent services guy, Mr. Byrd, has received his endorsement, no surprise there, and yet there is opposition. A lady, Gary, endorsed by your favorite newspaper, the Chronicle, Ms. Daniels. What is your take on whether or not it's likely to end up with these two in a runoff, or are there others?
First of all, I think it's going to be, obviously, in a runoff.
It's got to be a runoff.
But this is what we've missed, that the districts have actually shrunk. So if it's a low turnout election, there will be, 500 to 700 votes might be what somebody gets in the runoff, because the population in the districts has shrunk because of the expansion of districts.
That's interesting. So if that's the case, actually, if one of the candidates does a really good job of identifying supporters and turn them out, they could win without a runoff, even with 9 candidates.
That's exactly right, because it's who goes to the doors, who gets their IDs, and who gets their IDs out.
And you would think that Mr. Johnson's constituent service guy would have that wrapped up.
Right, because it's going to be who can hit the streets and make the connection. Because people, they've got to get their base out, whoever it is. And it looks like those 2 candidates you mentioned have a lot of community roots. Some of the others are relatively new to politics and new to the community as far as building name ID.
Have you been able to identify whether any of the candidates are going to be significantly well-financed like you typically are, Garnet?
Well,
are we talking about the same person?
Well, I don't know. Jerry Davis, who is the brother of Marcus Davis, who owns the Breakfast Club, is running. And, they have a lot of friends. So, again, it's good that people have become interested in politics and in running for office. But are the lobbyists going to send their money to anyone right now? No, they're going to wait for the runoff.
It's too early. The runoff is where you put your money.
And they actually may miss the ride this time if one of the candidates actually does crystallize and get the
I also
support.
understand that, in support of Garnet's observation, that the C Club which is a conservative group of insiders, hasn't picked anybody. The Houston Restaurant Association hasn't picked anyone, so the savvy folks are sitting it out, some of them.
Yeah,
and it's a smart move.
It's a smart move. I mean, because, again, the community needs to pick the 2 people that are going to go against each other to become the council member, and that's very important. So it's good that the lobby, quote unquote, sits it out in the beginning to allow the community to, even if people raise $5, they have an opportunity.
Well, the other thing you have to understand about District B is that it is one of the poorest districts in the city of Houston. It has been underfunded when it came to capital improvement dollars. It has a much older constituency as far as seniors are concerned. There are dilapidated housing. It's become a dumping ground. So whoever that candidate is, they need to know that community and be able to step up and actually address some of the issues instead of just giving the lip service that you traditionally hear from a lot of candidates.
It's interesting. I was going to ask you a concept that has bubbled up in politics. I know both of you are obviously keen political observers and, of course, politicians. But you know what's going on. In some states, they're considering going to what they call second choice voting. So you vote in the first round, and then you vote who your choice would be if the person you did not pick doesn't make it, so you don't have to necessarily have a runoff.
Actually, I'm for that. And the reason I am is because it allows people to ask for firsts and seconds. And it also allows for someone to get elected that may not be the favorite of a particular segment. Because if you're putting votes together on seconds, I mean, you can get there in the runoff, but just by being second.
But see, the concern that I have when you do it that way is in the second race, there are two different people who are usually running, and the issues may be shaped totally different. And I think that the voters deserve an opportunity to hear where those two candidates stand and then make a choice and not arbitrarily choose at some other time.
So you're a journalist. What are those issues that people are talking about that you report on in your newspaper,
Well, I mean,
the Houston Defender?
If you look at the issues that are in District B, the dilapidated houses are abundant out there. I mean, you can't drive down the
So
street
what is the city
without.
supposed to do?
They need to get representation that addresses those issues,
Tear 'em
tearing
down?
down the houses, whether that's mobilizing the private sector, utilizing public funds, or looking at the community as a manpower resource. I think now we have to be a lot more creative than we have been in the past because you're talking about limited dollars, but that doesn't mean you have limited resources.
And I guess District B is also interested in issues that face the city overall.
True.
Biggest issue I guess the city's facing now is the impact of the drought on the city, with all the dead trees, with the impact on the water and the sewer system. How does that impact on District B?
I think when you look at the age of the homes that are in District B, I think you'd agree with me, they're older homes. You have a lot of absentee ownership, though, so I'm not sure the constituents, there are people who are homeowners there. In fact, Fifth Ward being one of the older neighborhoods as far as home ownership is concerned, I'm sure they're being impacted equally. This whole drought thing, but also the drainage fee coupled with it, brings a heavy burden, particularly on those seniors that are out there.
But who are we kidding, Garnet? You were a supporter of the mayor of Houston, Anise Parker, and from what I've observed, the city council is a go-along, get-along group. They do whatever the mayor wants them to do.
I think they would disagree with you.
Show, other than the port commissioner choice that was rejected, how is this? How is single-member districts helped us at all?
Well, but it helps because they can be strong advocates for the people that they represent and not get defeated. If they're at large, they can be strong advocates for certain people, but they may get defeated. So that's the reason why district seats are extremely important. And then when it comes to this drought, I think it's important to understand that, you know, the houses are breaking apart because of the soil. Streets are breaking apart because of the same thing. And that's a big expense for this city to deal with moving forward. And the question is, whose streets get fixed?
There's an interactive service right now that you can find. Gary especially is interested in this. It tells you where your tax dollars are being spent and what division of your tax dollars goes where. You did the second biggest item is debt service. It is bigger than human services. It is bigger than capital improvements. Debt service. So my point is,
you're talking about Houston?
Yeah, Houston. It's 60 cents of every dollar is fire and police. Then it's debt service. So my point is that isn't the city of Houston basically, given the crumbling infrastructure you're talking about, going to be in desperate need of additional revenues, perhaps?
So that's what the infrastructure and drainage fee was about, David.
Right. But let's talk about this. That's every city in the country.
Say, what city is not getting hit with that? Okay,
and that comes from no new taxes, because at a certain point it just doesn't work anymore,
you can't
particularly when dollars are going down. And so we either are going to have dollars to take care of things, or guess what? We're going to borrow the money. And that, in my committee, the County Affairs Committee that I chair, we had an interim study on local government debt. And it's very clear that that's the replacement of raising taxes. We just make more debt.
Well, the reality, too, is that when you don't have taxes and you still want to cut, then somebody's going to get hurt. It's either going to be people or services. You cannot get around that. And the reality is the city of Houston, like so many other major cities, is getting hit on both of those fronts.
Well, but isn't it also fair to say that there was waste and abuse in the city of Houston system that needed to be looked at when budgets are tight? Because normally when the money's flowing in, nobody cares. It's like, whatever. But now
that's
they
like
have to start
saying
making
I got
tough
a fat
decisions.
neck and I'm going to cut my throat because of it. Okay, give me a break here, okay?
Well, I'm not asking you to cut your throat. I'm not suggesting you have a fat neck.
Is that gory enough for you?
Yeah, it does, but I mean, you know, you just said earlier about people in distress, economically in District B. It's one of the poorer areas. If it's like anything else, it's getting poorer, all right? And we still need to find revenue. So what are the new ideas that are coming up in order to support the city of Houston? Otherwise, it's just going to be you pick a mayor to run the police department and balance the budget. That's it.
Sonny talked about one area of new revenue. It's the infrastructure and drainage fee that people are complaining about. The truth is the fee as originally envisioned was going to be more than what the council actually approved because the need is significant. The reason it passed is because the voters determined that they were for certain expenditures by government if they knew where the money was going. Exactly. There's a distrust. There is a basic distrust engendered a lot by my party that no tax increase is ever good. But the voters themselves don't necessarily. That's true. But what the voters have said instead, I believe, and I've told Republicans this, they'll vote to spend more money, but they want to make sure it goes in the areas they want to spend it.
Right. And I agree. And that's why that passed. It actually, I think, surprised a lot of people.
Part of that pass was because people didn't understand what they were voting for in the first place.
Well, let me just be clear. In my area, I endorsed it. It won. Every place else that wasn't in my area, it lost. So when I
Garnet
say
Coleman's fault.
Well, but again, these are. I've been introducing the mayor, and I said, the mayor is the only one of the few people who thinks drainage is sexy, that is an important issue, but it is. But it's the type of thing that's dry. You have to convince a lot of people that it's necessary, and the problem in government mostly is we don't look to the future.
Okay,
No,
we'll look into the
We
future,
really
and
don't.
along those same lines, what are things that you believe that the citizens in District B and in the city of Houston would be interested in putting money up for to spend that they're not spending now?
Okay. I think that in the final analysis that people are going to want parks and rec back, particularly recreation, because that's what creates juvenile crime. And so we have to have somewhere for our children to go, and that's our park system. I also believe that people are going to want curb and gutter instead of ditches. And it's time to do curb and gutter instead of ditches with this drainage fee. We have to make sure also that this drainage fee goes to places where it floods, not to someone who wants to build a shopping center and needs detention and sewer.
Well, see, now, I think that it needs to be more directed towards those dilapidated houses, jobs, because right now, when you look at the educational level and the resources that are in that area, they need some type of resource as far as employment opportunity or some retraining that needs to be taking place, because you're looking at a very poor area that does not have the infrastructure, human capital-wise, to sustain a tax base to then be able to invest back into, as we talked about, some of the capital improvements.
Well, and you make a really good point, Sonny. And if you remember, my good friend of blessed memory, Jack Kemp, talked for years about enterprise zones to take these areas that are depressed and basically you come in, you bring a business, and you pay no taxes.
They
do work.
So maybe that's something that needs to be looked at for District B to encourage business opportunities to come in so people who work there,
I
live
agree.
there can get jobs.
And providing the training that's necessary or retraining to bring that level
And
of
that
skills
sounds a
up.
lot of like sustainable communities that the president has laid out.
It
as
does sound like that.
communities.
I almost want to give you a high five and say, yeah.
But Kemp was right.
Well, then
He
maybe
was right.
Obama ought to be selling it with saying this is
Jack
Jack Kemp's
Kemp's saying,
idea.
Look,
well, he's tried selling a number of things with Republicans men, and it's still not
but this
going
is the
on.
problem. Good ideas are good ideas, and that's what we need to move to. What are good ideas, whether they come from Republicans or Democrats? Because a good idea is a good idea.
Let me tell you what was not a good idea, in your opinion, which was the manner in which the schools of our area were treated in the legislative session. I'm sure after-school programs and pre-K are important to you. And, to weave that into a city-related question, where was the city of Houston's leadership in helping you, Garnet Coleman, try to preserve some of these services that were eliminated or were diminished?
Well,
where were they?
I think that again, I don't know.
waiting
I
on this one.
don't think most people understand who even runs the schools. First of all,
Yeah, that's
but
probably
I
true.
think that now mayors are really paying attention to that, and
Some are.
but I think in this case. The blame ain't on them, isn't on the city. The blame is on people who thought public education wasn't valuable.
But I think the blame rests on the institutions in our community, whether it's the business community,
Yes,
the
absolutely.
city of Houston, whoever the components are, all of us are in this pot together. What happened to me during the legislative session is everybody was trying to hold on to their own little cup instead of folks saying, okay, look, y'all, we're all on the same table. Let's all go for what, as a unit, to preserve some of this. And as a result, all of them got screwed.
Well, the real problem is we need more revenue, and there
Well,
wasn't
this is
any.
true.
And
Dividing pennies.
right. On the education front, there are many different opinions. We've had charter schools that are supposed to be the experiments, but the legislature won't appropriate enough money so that the public schools can actually turn into those experiments and carry them out. We know the benefits. And also, we have this situation where, quite frankly, Grover Norquist is winning, where we're ratcheting down the amount of tax dollars that go into programs. The difference is no one except Debbie Riddle thought that public education
she is
was.
who?
She's a member of the legislature from Northwest Houston, thought that the public education was socialist.
Well, but to be fair, Senator Dan Patrick, who is obviously a very conservative state senator, gave a speech after the session, I think in Sci-Fair, and said that the legislature needs to be looking at new ways to fund public education because the present system is not generating enough funds.
No doubt about it.
But don't you think that was the big issue as far as the legislature was concerned? They were so focused on the cut side and so little focus was placed on the revenue side that we were bleeding.
No focus was done on the revenue side except for raising someone's fees that's a professional, and that's how some of it was paid for. But folks have to know that $15.5 billion was cut from the budget.
Well, or is that from the requested budget?
No.
Money was cut. There's
No.
question.
That is not the number for current services. That's the number that was cut from the budget as filed. And we have to also remember that come about January of 2012, which is coming fast, there'll be a round of cuts. Just like there were in 2010.
Here's what I don't understand still. The mayor of Houston and a number of the members of council get elected from the people who are your neighbors, African American voters, correct? And so the people that were most impacted negatively by what happened in the Texas legislature were your folks, in the sense of your neighborhood folks. And so my question is, where
I don't think it was just, I think it was
No.
our folks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The most serious impact was where you are, where minority kids are, wherever you are. Where was the opposition from people who depend on your votes to keep their jobs?
This is the point. I think that the mayor came up there and tried to do things that benefited Houston, like Houston First. and those types of things. It's our responsibility in the legislature to debate those issues. Now, people have to understand that that's where it happens. I don't think that people elected Anise Parker to be the superintendent of schools.
Well, you also have to let's live in the real world. In the legislature, when you look at the two urban metropolitan areas, Dallas and Houston, they aren't exactly loved with all the rural legislators there. So when it comes to priorities related to our areas, it's not as easy as a lot of people think it is.
I want to ask you, why is it?
Can I hear amen?
Amen.
Okay.
Why is it that the legislature seems to micromanage the ability of cities and counties to do their business? Why don't they just let them do what they want?
Because
and they can
Let
pay
who
for
do
it.
what they want?
well, because there's some people who like to throw things downhill. And
A lot of that's
things.
happened.
And so it's unfunded mandates to counties and cities, and that's
Right.
what happened in this last session.
Well, that's a conservative position to say no unfunded mandates. I mean,
But I had the constitutional amendment.
Governor Perry is campaigning on we don't like unfunded mandates from the federal government. Why would be an unfunded mandate from Austin to City of Houston or Harris County or to Houston Independent School District? Why would that be any different?
It's not any different. And there's and when you try to when we try to move a constitutional amendment on unfunded mandates, the first thing that happens is it starts getting killed by the very people who don't want unfunded mandates. So it's an interesting dichotomy. Yeah, I mean, it's truth in advertising.
So they complain about them, but then they don't want an amendment that says there can't be any.
Well, no, they don't. Because I had one and Bert Solomon's had one, and I moved mine out of committee, but I couldn't get it out of calendars, and I sit on calendars. So.
Uh-oh. Calendars is
All right.
it's a little foreign.
How about, David, can we ask you
I'm
about
sorry.
partisanship in city elections? Do we think that it's nonpartisan elections, do we think the city council has become more partisan over the years?
Yes.
What's your evidence? What's your evidence for that, other than
Well,
Gary
just-
Polling running his slate?
No, that's when I'll tell you when it started. It started when Rob Mosbacher, who I really like, ran against Lee Brown. And he brought this running for lieutenant governor style of campaigning, which was partisan, into a non-party city race. And so what happened? Lee Brown responded in kind and brought in the president and a lot of other people. And then that's when the partisanship started. And that's an unfortunate thing.
And
But
ever since that race, each mayor has tried to straddle a fence to try to be perceived as nonpartisan, but everybody knows they have a D or R on their forehead, and they're trying to do the dance.
I think that she's exactly right.
So what's going to impact B is also the at-large race with council member Polland Jones, who's a rather controversial city council member. That's
The most controversial, to be fair.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so
Fair. I don't think
She has this
she's
love,
upset
hate-
about that.
Yeah, she has this love-hate relationship with HPD and with the fire department, and they don't seem to be able to let it go.
let's talk about cops and robbers. I don't know how many times I've picked up the newspaper and seen where some kid got beat up. A lot of people got shot in 2010. 22 out of 22, most of them minorities, shot, and not one cop charged.
Police
seven
officer.
dead.
Police
seven
officer.
dead. So I guess my question is, and we have, of course, the youngster who was beaten up on camera. It's normally said that, a DA can indict a ham sandwich. Apparently, if a cop's eating a ham sandwich, it doesn't work.
Well,
is there any protection against police violence in the inner city anymore?
Before David gets off with his rant, I do want to say, to be clear, in every one of those cases, the case was taken to the grand jury, and a grand jury decided to indict or not indict. That's true, but then go ahead.
Michael Young, basketball player from U of H, beaten
understand.
up.
We had a package of bills that responded to that particular incident, and they didn't get to the floor. Senator Ellis had a package of bills. Boris Miles had a package of bills. I had several bills. Clearly, the police have a lot of clout.
Is police brutality an issue at all in the city elections?
I don't think it has been. I think this race is a dud kind of race. If you look at the fact that the mayor's opposition is not any name that's prominent or is generating this energy, and as a result, you're not going to get a focus on the real issues. It's going to be kind of smooth sailing.
Well, but you did talk about the bills in Austin. Have you all had meetings with the African American police chief to talk about some of the concerns?
We actually did have a meeting with the African American police chief, and he was candid and helpful. But again, it comes down to agreeing to disagree and agreeing to agree. And Rodney, Senator Ellis, and I, but particularly Rodney, he moved them to a place where some people didn't want to go. And that was really important, that the law be strong and real. And I still believe that we ought to look at this coming back with this package of bills next session. Now, what the mayor did do was do a whole bunch of executive orders that took care of many of those items.
Internally.
Internally.
Right, because police can't police themselves.
I'm sure that candidates of District B are going to appreciate all of your wisdom tonight. Thanks to both of you for being here. Sonny Messiah-Jiles and Garnet Coleman. And we invite you to visit our home online at HoustonPBS.org. Click on the local program bar, Red, White, and Blue. Read about the guests. Watch the follow-up discussion, if you must.
Following this Red, White, and Blue show is the Houston Area League of Women Voters debate featuring the candidates running for Houston City Council District B.
That's coming up next.
That's right. Moderated by Houston PBS's own Ernie Manous. And I know Ernie will do a great job, and I think you'll enjoy that. So, David?
That's good. Until next time, get informed and get active and watch Ernie.